Hello! Thank you so much for coming to hang out with me today. So, I love old, ornate, heavily decorated Victorian lamps and lampshades, but it is surprisingly hard to find them. At least on the Facebook Marketplace around me, the pickings are pretty slim. So instead, I'm going to tackle something that I've been really interested in for a while now, which is learning how to make a lampshade. I'm going to do it, I suppose, what you would call the traditional way, where you start with a wire frame and you build up the fabric from there. I've never done this before. I have watched at least one YouTube video, and therefore I have an unearned amount of confidence in myself, and I feel like I will just nail it first time. I ended up ordering a wire frame from Amazon. I tried to pick a shape that looks slightly beginner friendly, but we will see if that is true. So yeah, I'm really interested to see how this turns out. I'm trying to not set myself up for failure by making something that is going to be the main focal point of a room. I'm mainly trying to learn how to do this process, use up some of my fancy scrap fabric that would just be sitting in the drawer otherwise. So I think it's just going to be a fun time, and I'm surprisingly looking forward to all of the hand sewing that this is going to mean. So the very first thing you want to do when starting the lampshade, according to my 1 or 2 videos worth of knowledge, is to check it over, make sure there are no rough spots or exposed spots, especially with reclaimed lampshades, ones that you find vintage and choose to recover. A lot of times some of the frame could be worn away, or some of the metal could be exposed, and you really want to sand away any burrs and seal it with a coat of Rust-Oleum or something that is rust-proof, rust-deterrent, because any exposed metal could rust and stain your fabric down the road. The way to prep it is to bind the frame. So what you want to do is acquire any sort of strips of cotton fabric. What I found to be super easy was actually just to take a cotton sheet and rip it into strips. I didn't measure these, I barely paid attention to them. I just grabbed any sheet from my stash and ripped it into, I'd say probably inch wide strips. And then I tried to pull any of the really stringy bits off just because it made it easier, but that was perfectly suitable for my needs. Anyways, I am rambling. Let me zoom in a little bit here and show you how the binding process works. The main thing to remember when putting the binding on your frame is to keep the tension as tight as possible. To do this, I found it easiest to sew the beginning of each strip around a junction of the frame, and then use my fingers to keep the tension as I wrap the strips around the frame. Alright, okay, so obviously, different day. I have a feeling this project is going to take me many days because it's a lot of hand sewing, but we do have the finished bound frame. So this is what it looks like. You just kind of mummify it, and having these strips of cloth around the frame is what actually allows you to sew the fabric onto the frame. So when you're sewing the fabric onto the frame, you're not looping the thread around the frame, you're sewing it to the binding on it. So that's especially why it's especially important that the binding is so tight, because you need to be able to maintain tension as you're sewing the fabric on top of it. So now that I have the frame bound, I will go ahead and show you the fabrics that I picked out for this. So what we have here is, I'm really trying to use up some scraps of stuff. So I'm going to see if I can't puzzle piece all of this stuff together and get away with it. So I have a couple scraps of this beautiful blue, gold, and bronzy fabric. And then I have this very shiny gold fabric that I am going to actually try to do a layered look with this blue, like gauzy damask. It's blue, like gauze and velvet damask patterned. So I'm going to try to layer them like this to have that beautiful gold shining through, but not have it be so gaudy. So I think next to each other, those are going to look Very pretty. So I'm going to go ahead and start pinning the fabric on. I am going to start with this because you need to do it one panel at a time, and I want to start getting a feel for if I will actually have enough fabric for this, because I would hate to sew all of this on and then realize I have to change plans because I don't have much else that would match that right now. So I'm gonna go ahead and start pinning, and I will show you when I'm done. When pinning and when sewing your fabric onto the frame, you really want to make sure you're catching the binding with each pass through. And there is a specific stitch called a lampshade stitch, which is essentially a whip stitch followed by a diagonal stitch, another whip stitch, and what this does is it locks each stitch in place and it allows it to stay incredibly tight and maintain that tension as you move along the fabric. Clearly, it's a different day, and I know it looks like I only wear these overalls, but I promise that is not true, and I just happened to catch 2 days that I wore overalls. But on to more relevant matters. The latest news on this is that I finished the main 3 panels here with my beautiful blue brocade, and then I started on the other sections where I was using this sort of gold brocade with a sheer and velvet navy blue damask. In theory, beautiful. In reality, I hate it. So I really thought it was gonna hang together really well, and it like clashes somehow. So I'm gonna have to have a little change of plans, and I think I'm just gonna play it really safe and use this cream kind of satiny fabric that I have. That's pretty much what it's gonna look like. So I am a little afraid that it's going to look like a circus tent, because it will be very aggressively striped at this point. But I think if I dye my fringe maybe like a cream and blue ombre, or I do some blue beading on these panels, I think I can get away with it. And it will also save me the hassle of trying to do these panels with 2 layers at a time, which, why do I always have to pick the difficult way to do it when I'm learning something? I don't need to sew 2 panels on 2 layers onto a panel at a time. So I'm going to make it, rein it in a little bit, make it a little easier for myself so that I can maintain a not insane learning curve for this project. Okay, so I'm going to sadly rip off all of the work I just did, and then I'm going to restart these last 6 panels, and hopefully like them a little bit better this time. So I'm gonna watch Gilmore Girls, and then I'll catch up with you guys when I have some more progress to show. Also, I have the cutest and least helpful sewing assistant in the world.
Ten years later.
Hello! So I am in the home stretch. I am going to start working on dyeing the fringe and the trim that I bought for the lamp. So I got the normal RIT fabric dye and also the RIT Dye More, which is meant for poly, nylon, acrylic, that sort of thing. Because I know the fringe is polyester, but I don't know what the trim is because I got it at a craft thrift store. And of course, you know, how are they supposed to know? Welcome to my kitchen. I don't think I've ever brought you in here before, but I have changed clothes because since I'm working with very bright blue dye, I figured if I wear blue clothing, what's it gonna do? Make it more blue? But I did a test batch of all of the different trims that I'm going to be putting on the lamp. So I have my fringe. Let's see if I can get it up here. I have my fringe. I have this kind of, I don't even know what to call it. It's just a thick polyester trim that kind of has an embossed flower pattern. And then I have some gimp braid. It's unraveling a lot since it's cut in a small piece. But this one was interesting because it didn't take the dye uniformly. So the kind of like polyester piping that's on the top of it dyed a very light powder blue. So I actually think that's going to stand out and look really cute. But I confirmed. Oh dear. All right, well, clearly that's hot enough. I've been doing it with the lid off and it's been staying at the perfect temperature. But since I just did the test batch and put it back on the burner, I was trying to get it back up to temperature quickly. I forgot to take the lid off and it's fine. We're fine. Fine. A blue stove is in vogue right now. But the dye recipe that I'm using is just the Rit Dye More in Sapphire Blue. Then you bring it up to temperature to 200 degrees. Technically, you could do that before you add the dye, so that in case you don't want to dye your thermometer. And then you put the fabric in pre-wet. So you have to wet your fabric completely first, and then you put it in the pot and stir it for 30 to 60 minutes. I did my test patches at 30 minutes, and they came out beautifully. The flower trim was a little dark, so I might do that one either shorter or last, because as I use this dye bath every time, it should dye it lighter and lighter. So I might just try doing that one last, since I'm gonna have to do these in separate batches anyways. There's no hard and fast rule that you have to do stuff in separate batches. It's just that I'm constricted by the size of my pot, because if you have fabric that's clumped up together in the pot and you can't stir it freely, it's going to dye very blotchy. So I'm going to go ahead and get started with the fringe first, and then I'm going to try to follow that up with the gimp braid, and finally the flower trim. I dyed all of my trim, intermittently adding more dye to the pot as more of the color got leached out of it. And then as you take each bit of trim out, you rinse it with warm water and then cool, and squeeze out as much excess water as you can until it runs clear. This was probably a little overkill, but I did actually brush my fringe out while it was still damp so that it wouldn't dry, twisted, or coiled. We are in the home stretch with this project. Finally, I got all of the trim dyed. You can see all this lovely trim. I forgot to show you yesterday, I also picked up this beaded trim to go in front of the fringe hanging down from it. So I just stuck that in the pot as well. Everything is blue. Everything has to be blue. So now I'm trying to figure out on my lamp what the layout I would like it to be. I think I'm going to be putting this just like floral tape along the seams, and then the beads and the fringe along the bottom, and then the bottom I'm going to use the gimp braid because it's able to handle the curves of the points much better than the floral tape is. I'm going to actually glue all of this trim on. I considered using hot glue because I want it to be fast and I want to be done, and I'm kind of like, everybody uses LED bulbs nowadays, so I can't get that hot, but I figure I should take the safe way. I'm going to use E6000 and then just pin it into place as I go using my old ratty pins that I don't really care if they get in glue or not. Before I glued down the trim on the seams, I had to snip away any excess fabric or threads that would have stuck out from underneath it. Then it was as simple as cutting the lengths of trim and gluing them on and pinning them into place. It was super easy. Also, this is what I actually look like behind the scenes of all of these clips. I valiantly did all of the seams, the top and the first layer of fringe with the E6000, but I gave up and I switched to hot glue. And after some final beating, it was time for the reveal. Okay, I am so happy to be done with all of that hand sewing, but we finally have a beautiful completed lampshade. I love her so much. She is so sparkly, she is so shiny, she is so blue. This was very much a labor of love, especially with how many hours of hand sewing it took. But I am immensely pleased with how it turned out, especially for the first time I've ever made a lampshade. It's surprisingly, none of the individual skills were very difficult. It was just very time consuming. So the biggest question I had at the end of this was what to do with the lampshade, because we have a lot of greens and pinks in the house and other colors that you can see in this chair, but I don't really have much blue in my house, and I really didn't want this lampshade to just immediately go in the back of my closet in the hopes that someday it might match one of my rooms. And instead, I thought, why not give it to one of you guys who might actually be able to use it? So look in the description below for instructions on how to enter the giveaway. More details down below. But I really wanted it to actually be put to good use and not languishing at the bottom of a pile of decor that I'll never have use for. So if you're interested again, look for the description. But there's really not much more to say this month. Super fun. My fingers hurt. I'm really tired. So I will see you guys again next month. Bye.